Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Last day? Yeah? Awesome. I'm super excited to be here for multiple reasons. And I'm going to share some of those reasons with you through this presentation. But one of the reasons, of course, is being here in Saskatoon. I've been in Saskatchewan. For me, it's like my first time. I'm based in Waterloo, Ontario. And so it's like, of course, 3.5 hours flight. But worth it completely because we're in a beautiful place here. So a little bit of an introduction about myself before we jump into the topic that we would like to share with you today. A little bit of myself, my journey in supply chain management. So 20 plus years approximately in the field. I worked for 4 different companies. I lived in 4 different countries. Fortunate to live in different countries. End-to-end experience in supply chain. That means like during my career in supply chain, I've worked in different functions like demand planning, inventory management, procurement, logistics, warehousing. So very much a little bit of everything during those plus 20 years. Some of the companies that I work for, different industries, global transportation, food and beverage manufacturing, more on the spare parts side of things at Finning Caterpillar. And then my last job was VP of planning and procurement for a large nutraceutical company in Vancouver. So a little bit of everything. Now I did also on the side some supply chain management consulting. So also experience in other industries like the ones that you can see here, electronics, industrial manufacturing, oil and gas, apparel, so various industries. Now, what I'm doing now, so I'm the founder and CEO of a company called the Owl Solutions. And when people ask me a couple of things, so why the name of Owl? A lot of people ask me that question, why you guys are called Owl? And my answer is that when you look at, and when you think about owls, are amazing animals, right? They have a few characteristics that make them quite amazing. One is that they can see in the dark, right? And I used to say to my friends that supply chain data many times is very dark. And therefore you need some additional eyes maybe to see through that darkness. Same thing when owls can turn their head around, not 365 degrees, but 270. And that gives you an extended view of things that are what's going on in your supply chain. So that's part of the reasons why we're called owls. And essentially at the very, very heart of what we do is we really want to help people in supply chain achieve more. And so let me ask you a question. Please raise your hand if you feel, and don't be ashamed, how many of you feel like you really, really, really know your numbers? Really, really know your numbers, and you're really confident about the numbers that you have in your supply chain. Raise your hand, please. How many of you are in that state of clarity? Well, it's not uncommon, right? It's not uncommon. I mean, a lot of people is unfortunately not in that state of clarity and really knowing their numbers. And that's something that we're trying to change. And that's the reason why we are working in this field. Now, the topic that we're going to discuss today is essentially 3 things that really are really, really close to my heart. And I've highlighted those 3 things in red here: data, supply chain, and sustainability. And we truly believe that the intersection between those 3 things is really the golden opportunity for really making an impact in the actions that we as supply chain people is taking in the sustainability space. But before we get there, question for you. Who in the audience is really sick and tired of hearing about supply chain issues? Please raise your hand. I'm really sick and tired of. So think about this. Everything for the last couple of years has been attributed to supply chain issues. So we go to the supermarket. And we don't find something. Oh, it's supply chain issues. So we go to a car dealer and we're looking for our car, and then there's no car because there's no inventory. There's supply chain issues, right? Everything seems to be supply chain issues. Now the reality is that there's a lot of wins too. Over the last years, I think, because of the work that you do in the field, plus many other people, I think there's a lot of wins. So I think it's a good time for us to start changing the narrative and start concentrating ourselves in the wins too. Now, again, back to my point, a lot of good things have happened. Now the question is, how can we turn those good things into amazing things? I didn't hire any PhD for creating this graph here. It's a very simple, common sense thing. But I want you to please follow me in the logic. So why do we remember issues more than wins? Why? It's a human thing. Why do we tend to remember more the things that we do wrong, or the things that are challenging, more than the things that are really winning? And I'm going to describe here, probably again, common sense, no PhD analysis involved here. But when you think about issues, and on one axis is impact to the business, and on the other axis is time, most of things start very small. Impact to the business is small. But over time, things continue to grow, and issues get bigger, and the impact to the business get bigger. To the point, Hugo was a good guy. Unfortunately, he's not the supply chain manager anymore. There's another guy coming in. So common sense, why don't we tackle the issues here? So why don't we try to tackle the issues where still the impact to the business is not that high? It sounds common sense, right? Now, the challenge, at least what we see in many situations, again, based on experience working with a lot of companies, is that most of the time, catching those issues early on is hard. It's not easy. Now, the list of things that I'm going to mention here is not the complete list, but one of the issues that we see all the time is that companies many times live in a state of confusion around what's going on, what's my data, how should I measure certain things, how should I monitor, what are the relevant things that I should pay attention to, how do I collect the information that is relevant for me. So one of the things that we see frequently is that companies operate in this state of confusion, right? Now, the second thing, again, this is not in order of priority, but the second thing is that we see a lot of conversation around data. So dark data, we call it, right? So data is not usually ready for analysis right away. It's hard to digest, it's not harmonized, there's a lot of challenge around it. And the final thing is that we are all surrounded by a lot of manual tools that some of them may have worked in the past, but they are not necessarily the solution that we need for scaling our business moving forward. Now, even if we have developed the ability internally to catch issues early, the second thing that typically happens is that although we get those issues early, actually driving corrective actions is even harder. So making sure that your people is executing on the things that we identified, sometimes things get even harder. The reason why I'm explaining this before we get into sustainability is because at the end of the day, coming back to my slide with sustainability, supply chain, and data, is a framework, it's a way of thinking. And this is the way of thinking that I'm proposing to you today, which is essentially a holistic approach to gain more clarity and hopefully achieve better results. And the framework that we use all the time, and I use all the time when I talk to people, no matter the size of the company, it could be a large enterprise, it could be a small business, it doesn't really matter. At the end, and here's the logic that I wanted to share with you. So you may have in your organization all the data in the world, but if you're not turning the data into insights, data is useless. Now, you may have insights. So you did the work, you were able to turn some of those data elements into insights, but if you're not taking action, those insights are useless. So therefore, companies that we see that perform better and achieve more are companies that somehow are following a framework like this. Collecting data, doing the work of analyzing that data and turning that into insights, and then finding a way to execute on those insights and take some actions. And if you continuously execute this methodology, highly likely you're going to achieve better results. It doesn't mean that you're going to resolve everything, but highly likely you're going to achieve better performance and better results. Let's talk about sustainability. So when people think about sustainability, sometimes they think about this green world against the dark world. This image or the similar image comes to our minds. Let's put it more concretely, and I would like to share this slide from a company called Constellation, which is actually #1 producer of carbon-free energy in the US. And I like this image here because it brings a little bit more reality to what are the examples of environmental sustainability initiatives or areas that you could consider in your organizations to work with. So we're talking about renewable energy, waste, and pollution, water. Well, you can read this list. But essentially are examples of things a little bit more concrete that companies could be doing or evaluating in the world of environmental sustainability. Now, this is an interesting statistic, right? And that's the reason why I'm saying that supply chain and sustainability are very, very connected. 60% of all global emissions are generated by supply chains. It's huge. So the responsibility that we have as supply chain professionals is huge. I mean, of course, we in supply chain, we care about cost, we care about service, we care about inventory, we care about quality. One of the things that we should, of course, we care about also the environment. And we have a huge power, right? Because 60% of all the emissions generated are caused by supply chains in general. So they're twins. It's hard to separate supply chain and sustainability. Now, there's a lot of buzzword around sustainability. A lot of buzzword. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of those buzzwords. So the buzz that is created in the environment, in the market. So think about the number of web searches only in the US per year. So 50 million web searches looking for the word sustainability. So as people is interested in this topic, more and more. 13 million LinkedIn followers of the hashtag sustainability. Again, buzz. People trying to get into this topic, trying to understand more. Corporate reports. Who works for a company that issues corporate sustainability reports? Raise your hand, please. Right, but huge growth. So 100x over the last couple of decades in the adoption of corporate CSR reports using GRI standards. Today, 90% of the world's largest companies produce CSR reports, right? So there's a lot of activity going on apparently around sustainability, discussions, conversations, people talking about it. Now let's do a little bit of a reality check. So how is this thing impacting? Is it really moving the needle forward or not? So, well, according NASA, it looks like we're not moving the needle at the speed or impact that we need. This is a graph that shows carbon dioxide over the last, million years, right? So, and you can see here very little, but today we're here, right? So never before in history we have been in a worse place scenario in terms of carbon dioxide. And of course there's a connection between carbon dioxide and climate change, warming the planet. This is just a zoom in here of the last 60, 80 years. So therefore we got a challenge, and there's a reality that we got a challenge. This is not something that we're inventing here, making up. There's a responsibility that we need to take. Now, essentially, my personal conclusion around sort of this reality check is that we have definitely an issue with impact, an issue with speed, and also scale. So we're doing things, but we need to do it faster, better, and more impactful. So those are the three things that are relevant for starting moving the needle forward. Now, to the question, so how can we move from buzz to action? So how can we do something in your roles, in your responsibilities, under your responsibilities, that you can see some results, measure it, and monitor it? Well, this is not my quote, but this is Warren Buffett quote, right? And the reason why I bring this up is because I think that sustainability itself is such a huge topic that if we try to boil the ocean and try to do everything, at the end, we're going to do nothing. So therefore, I think one of the key things, and one of my suggestions, because I've seen success in organizations picking their battles and defining one thing that they would like to do better. Now, how can you pick a game that you can win, or you can show some wins? And here I'm bringing a few ideas about criteria, how to select that use case, how to select that initiative within your organization that maybe can help to move this cause forward. So in terms of ideal use cases, so the first criteria that I would suggest is try to pick something that you could create a baseline, so you could establish your current state with clarity. So what's your current state? So the reason why I ask also the question if you know your numbers well is because of this. So we need to be able to identify one initiative across our organization that at least we can set that initial baseline. The second criteria for selection of this use case, sustainability use case, is finding something that you can set some goals. So once you have the baseline, define something that you can set a goal, and hopefully it's a realistic goal that you can achieve in a year, 2 years, 6 months, 5 years. But something that you could put a goal to it. And finally, something that you can monitor at the speed, hopefully, of your operations. I'm not saying every single minute, every single second, but something that you can measure at the speed of operations. So something that you can measure maybe daily, weekly, etc., but something that you can really track and measure. So this is not perhaps applicable to all of you in the context of your organization. I could say that, but if you think about it, maybe it's applicable actually to every one of you. But let me talk a little bit about packaging, waste, and pollution. And this is the reason why I wanted to talk about this specific thing, which again, you may find your own specific initiative or your own specific use case, but essentially the framework of analysis is the same, right? So let's talk about the state of affairs of packaging waste in Canada. Did you know this number? 90% of plastics that essentially we collect, right, in the blue bin that we do our work, separating, splitting, residential waste, etc. 90% of that anyway is going to end up in a landfill, or incinerated or polluted. That's the reality. It's a sad reality, but that's what it is. There's multiple reasons why that happens, but essentially this is the reality, 90%. Now, that means that all of us here in this room, we are producing per year approximately 108 kilograms of only plastic waste. I'm not talking about any other kind of packaging, but I'm talking about plastics for a minute. That's a lot. So 108 kilograms a year, each of us. I'm based in Waterloo, Ontario. That's where I call my home now. But think about this. Think about available landfill capacity. So at the rate that we're actually creating waste, so landfill capacity is going to be exhausted in essentially 9 years from now. Now, the government has set some very ambitious goals, right? So by 2030, so the government is expecting to eliminate plastic packaging waste from the entire supply chain. Now the situation, the reality is that if we just project our existing consumption rate and recyclability rates and everything, we're extremely far away from hitting those goals. So actually, in 2030, if we don't change dramatically the way how we recycle things, reuse, or eliminate waste, we're going to end up with still 88% of plastic packaging waste in landfills. So Houston, we got a problem. That's what's happening right now. Now, a couple of more numbers here. You may ask, so this waste is generated by businesses or is created by consumers? So, and here's the interesting part too. So 52% of all the waste disposed is actually industrial waste. So it's created by businesses, right? So it could be a retail business, it could be a manufacturing business, it could be, you name it, a distributor, but 52% of all the waste disposed in landfills is essentially business waste, right? And 44% is waste that is more residential, so connected to the blue bin and our recycling system. Now, out of the 52%, which is business waste, only 5% gets effectively recycled, and from residential waste, 16% gets effectively recycled. Back to my comment around, we do the work, we separate, we use the blue bin, etc., but essentially only 16% gets effectively recycled into the economy. So the question is, what can we do about it? Again, going back to my original diagram here, intersection between supply chain, sustainability, and data, I want to share one example of the work that one Canadian consumer packaged goods company is doing today to hopefully illuminate their decision making and trying to change some of this. And that's what I wanted to share with you too. Again, with the idea of inspiring some ideas. Maybe it's not 100% applicable to every one of you in your reality of the work that you do, but I think the intention here is just to inspire some thought, some ideas, and a spark that ignite the movement, I would put it this way. You have to try to do something about this thing because all of you has a responsibility as well. So with this Canadian CPG company, what essentially is driving their intention for change, number one is because, and I'm describing here a little bit of their context. So the first thing is that they have a sustainability mandate. They really want to become more sustainable. They want to do some things better for the environment. And essentially, they really want to walk the ESG sustainability talk. Let's put it this way. Not only a talk, not only a mandate, not only something that we publish in our annual reports, we really want to move this cause forward with actions. The second element of this context is pressure, right? Pressure coming from stakeholders, shareholders, people asking for, what are you guys doing effectively? And the third point, again, context, is company with a small team in sustainability, not a lot of resources, not a huge budget to accomplish sustainability initiatives, so therefore constraints, right? So it's not the scenario that you have a huge budget for accomplishing sustainability initiatives. You have constraints, and therefore you want to do more with less, essentially. This diagram is just a little representation of part of the challenge that perhaps when you think about the supply chain, you will see. So essentially there's upstream and downstream in the supply chain. So upstream, of course, is your relationship with your suppliers. Then when you work with your suppliers, you're bringing, so for instance, let me give you an example just to make it more concrete. I brought this little hand sanitizer here, right? So think about this hand sanitizer as the product that this manufacturing company is producing at this stage. So upstream in their supply chain, they're procuring materials that allow this organization to manufacture this hand sanitizer, right? Now, when they're bringing in materials, raw materials, packaging components, everything, they're not just importing the raw material or the ingredient that is producing this product. They're also bringing in a lot of packaging. Packaging that wraps the product, pallets, wrapping paper, wrapping plastic, a lot of things, carton, etc. Now, if you start adding all of that thing times the number of containers that you are importing in a year, you end up with a lot of packaging that gets disposed at the end of the manufacturing process. Back to my comment, around 52% of the industrial waste is generated at that level. So, of course, it's idealistic. Imagine a world where packaging is going to be zero from that perspective, because you have to ship the product, you have to make sure that it's secure for shipment. But there's initiatives that you can work with your suppliers to start identifying how can you save some packaging in that operation, in that shipment operation. So, but the first thing is always collecting the data. Collecting data from your suppliers of every single activity that happens when they're shipping the product to you. Start measuring and creating a baseline around everything that you are sourcing to your manufacturing facilities. The reason why this is important is because of two things. There's many others, but I'm going to summarize it in two. Number one, when you are accumulating waste, industrial waste, it's not for free. You're going to have to pay a recycling company to come to your facility, and you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to pay fees to a third-party company to come to your facilities, pick out the material, and then dispose it. So you're investing money or wasting money, or however you want to call it, right? And then in addition to that, there's also an environmental impact, because if we assume that a high percentage of that material is going to end up anyway in a landfill, so is the lose-lose situation. So you're wasting money and at the same time creating more environmental impact. Now, if you think about the product, once the product gets manufactured, also the product comes with a lot of packaging. If it is a finished good that you're producing, then you're making decisions at this level. So what should I put in this product? Should I use this cap with this type of material? Should I use this wrapping, which actually is covering the product? What's the type of, then I'm putting, I don't know, 60 of those in a carton box and shipping this to our customers. So all of those decisions actually you're making every single day. And the thing is that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of EPRs. Do you know what EPR means? Extended Producer Responsibility? Well, the EPR are rules that every province in Canada is releasing very shortly, and I invite you to visit, and Google EPRs, because you're going to find some interesting information there. So essentially, governments and provinces are making manufacturers responsible for the cost of all the packaging that gets shipped to consumers. So essentially, the cost of the blue bin is being transferred from public funds to corporations. So therefore, not far from now, if you're a CPG company or a company that is sending product to consumers, so you're going to be financially liable for the amount of packaging or the type of packaging that you're using for producing this product. So therefore, there will be a financial impact for it if you are in the CPG industry or in any industry that's consumer facing. So therefore, it's better to get ahead of the game and start thinking about how can I incorporate that within my metrics? How can I incorporate that within the way how I assess my sustainability and my performance in supply chain? because it will have a financial impact, and on top, of course, the environmental impact associated with more waste in landfills. But essentially, the message here is that it's not doing sustainability because it's good for the environment only. Of course, that should be the number one priority, but also there will be a financial consequence, and therefore it's always better to get ahead of the game and start thinking about this even before regulations come into place in every single province in the country. Any question here? Any comment? Were you familiar with AEPR? No? Now, typical question. So what? So why this is important? Why are you talking about this thing? Well, essentially because there's three things that should be important for you to consider. So the first one is that by reducing the amount of waste, packaging waste in your processes, number one, you could be saving money. So it's not only, again, sustainability costs only, but also you could be saving money in terms of recycling fees and also in compliance reporting to local authorities. So therefore, saving money is a factor. Second is reducing carbon footprint, and reducing carbon footprint associated with elimination of shifting packaging use. And the third one is that a lot of companies today, and I envision a world where this is going to be more mainstream even in the future, that organizations are going to benefit from promoting their commitments in terms of reducing packaging waste. And maybe in the future you will see that instead of just having the labels that indicate the ingredients of the product, not far from now you will see also labels highlighting how much packaging went into producing this product. So therefore, you as consumers are going to have choices, and you're going to be making choices around who do you want to partner with, what product do you want to buy. So therefore, even brand awareness is going to be a huge factor for companies moving forward. A couple of additional slides before we go into Q&A, but essentially my message to you here is that I truly believe that the intersection between supply chain, sustainability, and data is really the golden opportunity for organizations to move to a better environmental impact and being able to save money, and at the same time being able to have more established processes that go in the direction of, again, balancing the equation. Supply chains need to be balanced, and that's the reason why we believe truly that this intersection between those three things is what companies should be thinking about. Just to recap, I think from my perspective, moving from buzzword to action requires a couple of things. One, what we call collective intelligence. So that means this is not a problem that you're going to be able to solve in isolation. This is not a problem that we are going to be able to address if we don't work collaboratively. So this involves you as manufacturers or distributors working with your suppliers, identifying opportunities to reduce waste and also address, the supply chain issues moving forward. The other thing is traction is everything. What that means is that, as I mentioned before, you have to pick your battles. You have to pick one thing that really you can drive change forward, instead of trying to boil the ocean, instead of trying to do too much that actually don't deliver results. Picking your battle, and again, thinking about this criteria that I give to you as an idea, something that is achievable, something that you can baseline, and something that you can set some goals and monitor regularly. And finally, is getting some early wins. I think this is change, and change is always related to showing results. So if you don't show results, if you don't measure, if you don't make those things visible to the organization, I think it's harder and harder to move a cost forward. So showing some early wins, I think, is critical for making sure that your initiatives are successful. So the last slide, or couple of slides at the end. So for people who is interested in this topic, I mean, I'm going to leave my cell phone and my email if you want to call me or want to send me an email. For people here who is interested on this topic specifically, so there's an organization called SDTC. SDTC stands for Sustainable Development Technology Canada. So it's an organization that provides funding for companies that are interested into initiatives that connect sustainability, technology, data, supply chains. So if you are interested, send me an email, connect with me. I'm more than happy to provide you with more information about this thing. There might be an opportunity for, again, funding and being able to help you move this cause forward. So if you're interested, please get in touch with me. I can provide you with more details on how this information could be beneficial for your organizations as well. Last slide. Question for you. Who thinks that AI is the biggest threat to humanity? Please raise your hand. Who thinks that AI is the biggest? I've been listening to this quite a lot around everything that's going on with ChatGPTs and things like, we don't know, it's going to be like the Matrix in the future, or it's going to be whatever, right? So who believes that AI is one of the biggest threats to humanity? I'm the only one? Well, the reason why I believe that AI is actually one of the biggest threats to humanity is because I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. I'm actually talking about action in action. This is one of the biggest threats to humanity. Not taking action, staying there, and just going with the status quo. So, thank you very much, guys. Any question, any comments, please feel free.